from the age of about 21 to 35, I had a health condition. All night, every night, my skin would just itch like crazy. Every millimeter of my skin from head to toe would just have the most intense itching imaginable. So I couldn't really sleep for 14 years. And there'd be blood and skin everywhere every morning. I couldn't stop scratching. And yeah, it wasn't pleasant. It meant I was in and out of work. I was always on ridiculous amounts of medication, whether it be steroid creams, eventually steroid pills and injections to heal up the skin, or antibiotics to heal it up, or sleeping pills to try and help me sleep or relax. They give me anti-anxiety pills because you can't relax when you're in that state. And my immune system was kind of shot as well. So I'd come down with every kind of cold and flu going. And yeah, I was just like a walking pharmacy cabinet, and life wasn't much fun. So that was where I was coming from. And the more medication I was given, it might give me some temporary relief sometimes, but it would always actually make the problem worse in the long run. And I always had this mantra in my head. I'd seen it on a billboard. It was an advert for Johnny Walker whiskey. And I don't know what this has got to do with Johnny Walker whiskey, but it said, "We will find a way, or we will make one." And that was in my head. And I knew however long it takes, whatever it takes, I have to find a way. I'd wake up every day feeling suicidal and say, no, I'm going to find a way. I am going to find a way. And if it takes me till I'm 50, 60, 70, I'm going to find a way. Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Truth, Health, Freedom podcast. I'm Alan Burton, and I'm usually your host, but today the tables have been turned. This episode showcases my guest appearance on the highly rated Go All In podcast. So your host today is my friend, Robert Brus. Robert features guests who have gone all in on something, and they share with him their successes, their failures, and what they learned along the way. Here, I share my journey from chronic ill health to enjoying a life of well-being, primarily through detoxification and whole food plant-based nutrition. I'm sharing this in detail for the very first time in the hope that my own experience and what I've learned from it may help others experiencing similar issues. So if you'd like to ask me anything about the issues discussed, please feel free to contact me. But for now, I'll hand you over to your host for today, Robert Brus of the Go All In podcast.
On today's show, our guest is Alan Burton. Alan is a fellow podcaster and professional singer. Alan's show is called the Truth, Health, Freedom podcast, and he has a laser-sharp focus on these three very important topics. Alan's skills as a performer and broadcaster are a unique mix that allow him to conduct interviews and tell stories with all the passion and heart that a performer can muster. But don't be fooled by his happy, outgoing and carefree attitude and demeanor. It wasn't always this way for him. For many years, Alan battled with chronic illness and paralyzing anxiety until he slowly overcame it with diet, nutrition, and an absolute focus on the discipline it took to maintain this. Alan's road to recovery has been a long one, and his dedication to go all in strengthens each day with an unwavering commitment to never go back to where he was. To someone like myself who's never had any health problems, Alan's journey is truly inspirational, and it's my pleasure to be able to bring his story and his message to you, the listener. Please help me in welcoming Alan Burton. Hey, are you totally committed? Are you playing full out? Are you all in? Hi, my name is Robert Brus, and this is the Go All In podcast. Join me as we explore amazing stories of success, heartache, and absolute triumph by those who have gone all in. I'm glad you're here, so let's get to it and do whatever it takes to go all in and create the life of your dreams. Well, welcome to the show, mate. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
No problems. Look, I like to start off with all my guests with a quick little get to know you quiz. It helps us calm our nerves down. It warms us up a little bit, and it helps us to get to know you just a little bit more. Are you ready?
Certainly am.
Okay, cool. You just need to tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Do you like lead vocals or do you like singing backup?
Lead.
Do you prefer singing in a band or singing solo?
Solo.
You really had to think about that one. This is a quick fire answer, okay? Don't think too hard about it.
I've only got experience of solo.
Oh, okay. I see. So do you prefer a paleo diet or a vegan diet?
Vegan.
When it comes to training, do you prefer cardio or weights?
Both.
Both?
If I had to choose, it'd probably be cardio.
Nice one. Nice one. What's the biggest gig that you've ever played?
Manchester Airport, maybe 2010, 11, 12. Can't remember when.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the... Oh, I don't know, but there's a big hangar, and Concorde is kept in the hangar. And I was on the steps of Concorde singing to all the people below, a big charity event. Fantastic. And that's the biggest by far.
Have you ever forgotten the words?
Yes.
What do you do when you forget the words?
You make them up.
Do you play an instrument?
No.
No instrument? Do you ever bother to learn, or just can't be bothered learning? Just focus on the singing?
I've bought one guitar and been given another one.
Mm-hmm.
I had 4 lessons last autumn,
mm-hmm.
but I've just not put the practice in. I would love to, but it's one thing me saying I'd love to, but if you want to play, you've got to practice.
I really feel like learning an instrument is something that you absolutely have to go all in. You can't dilly-dally with that at all. Once you get lessons, that kind of gives you the fundamentals and the basics, but then you really got to practice those fundamentals to get good at stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I was lucky with my voice. It was very rusty and raw when I started, but I could always sing. Whereas the guitar, it's a completely different thing. So with singing, it's easier to stick at it because I could see where it was going. With the guitar, I'm thinking, I'm never going to be able to do this. That's the mindset I need to get out of. So one day I would love to, because I don't actually enjoy singing to backing tracks. I'd much rather be playing the instrument live, feeling those vibrations from the acoustic guitar, and being able to write my own songs as well. I would love that. And that's the dream. So I'm over here. I'd like to be over there, just as once upon a time, I would be working on a bar. I'd see someone up there singing, and I think, how do I get from here to there? And I'm kind of the same with an instrument. It's like, and where other people are with their music, I'm thinking, how do I get from here to there? So I'm hoping another 55, 60 years or so of life.
Got a bit of time.
Yeah. So plenty of time.
I'm not a musician, but like most people, I love music. I love all music, actually. I grew up with heavy metal and hard Aussie rock and that sort of thing, but I like everything. I've got a young daughter who likes Selena Gomez and pop and stuff like that, and I find myself, when no one's watching, bopping along and singing along to those tracks as well. So but I'm always envious of people that can play an instrument and sing at the same time. Yeah. And, there's heavy metal people like, the James Hetfields and the Dave Mustaines of the world, being able to play the guitar and those really complex riffs and solos and singing at the same time. It's really, really super coordinated. I can barely walk and talk at the same time.
Yeah. Even if they can't sing, I'm just in awe of anyone who can play, particularly if they can play well, like the people you just mentioned. There's a guy I know called Andrew Mutcher, and when he plays the guitar, my mouth just hits the floor. It's amazing. Absolutely
it seems like
amazing.
A really common thing that these folks can play the guitar or their instruments really well, and here I am on the sideline wondering how they do it. Maybe we should dive in and have a crack at it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, definitely. Meet up in 5 years' time and compare notes and have a jam. And by then you'll have been able to grow your hair. I was going to ask you, I know it's your show, but did you ever have the hair to go with the musical taste?
I had a semi-mullet when I was a little bit younger. I'm not sure if the audience is familiar with that terminology. I know the Aussie audience was, it's short on top and long at the back. So the short answer is, yeah, kind of, I had the hair.
Excellent. I want to see the picture.
All right, last question for our little quiz. It's a serious one, mate. Do you prefer meditation or contemplation?
Contemplation comes more naturally. So I'll go for contemplation.
Cool. Excellent. Me too. And it's not that it comes naturally for me. I just can't empty my brain box to meditate and think of nothing. It's too much going on for me. So instead of trying to do that, I just contemplate that one particular thing that I seem to be needing to work on at the time. Well, nice one, mate. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It gives us a little insight into your instantaneous thinking and your little world as well. People come on over to the Go All In podcast to learn more about others that have gone all in. So if you could, mate, could you please share with us your biggest all-in story or stories and the lessons that you've learned from your decisions and your commitment to success?
Okay. My biggest all-in is probably nutrition for the purposes of turning my health around. Probably from the age of about 21 to 35, I had a health condition, and that was all night, every night, my skin would just itch like crazy. Every millimeter of my skin from head to toe would just have the most intense itching imaginable. So I couldn't really sleep for 14 years. And there'd be blood and skin everywhere every morning. I couldn't stop scratching. And yeah, it wasn't pleasant. It meant I was in and out of work. I was always on ridiculous amounts of medication, whether it be steroid creams, eventually steroid pills and injections to heal up the skin, or antibiotics to heal it up, or sleeping pills to try and help me sleep or relax. They give me anti-anxiety pills because you can't relax when you're in that state. And my immune system was kind of shot as well. So I'd come down with every kind of cold and flu going. And yeah, I was just like a walking pharmacy cabinet, and life wasn't much fun. So that was where I was coming from. And the more medication I was given, it might give me some temporary relief sometimes, but it would always actually make the problem worse in the long run. And I always had this mantra in my head. I'd seen it on a billboard. It was an advert for Johnny Walker whiskey. And I don't know what this has got to do with Johnny Walker whiskey, but it said, we will find a way or we will make one. And that was in my head. And I knew however long it takes, whatever it takes, I have to find a way, because I'd wake up every morning and I've had no sleep. I've been through hell that night. It's the same as the night before and the night before and the nights going back months and years. And I'm thinking, if this is what life is, life's not worth it. I can't do anything that, in my opinion, makes life worthwhile. So to me, it was, I'd wake up every day feeling suicidal and say, no, I'm going to find a way. I am going to find a way. And if it takes me till I'm 50, 60, 70, I'm going to find a way. And I wasn't really getting anywhere with it, but I think and I'd always try different things with food and things like that. And I'd noticed some things made a very, very slight difference. Like I remember having a bottle of vegetable juice from Tesco, and I remember that seemed to take the edge off it. It was like if the fire was at 100 out of 100, it took it down to 95. And so I knew there was something that could be done. And then I remember, it's my girlfriend at the time, she'd heard somewhere that having colonic irrigation could perhaps help. So I went for colonic irrigation. This was 2007, I believe. And the place that did colonic irrigation also had all kinds of naturopathic therapy there. And there was a nutritionist and there was a naturopath, and I saw all of them and began to make changes to my diet and began a long detox program. The colonics gave me the first relief I'd had in years. I remember coming out of there and it was like someone had put the fire out. It was like someone had come along with a fire extinguisher and put that fire out. But then within hours, the night would come and the whole thing would come back again.
Was it worse at night time, or did you feel like that all the time?
I didn't realize I felt like that all the time until I had the colonic, because then it showed me the contrast. Sometimes you don't know how you feel until you're relieved from it.
Yeah.
And then when you're relieved from it, you realize, all right, so this is normal. So actually there's a base level that's there all the time, that was there all the time. Then every night it would just be, in heavy metal terms, they'd turn it up to 11, spinal tap terms, they'd turn it up to 11. And that would go on every night. So it wasn't nighttime. It'd be like maybe 8, 9, 10 o'clock, usually that kind of time, when it would really start to kick in. And I would become quite absent in myself. So my girlfriend at the time, I really feel for her, because I would become an absent person because the anxiety and the itching would take me over so much that I wasn't particularly present in that state, physically or emotionally. So yeah, that's what had happened. And so slowly, things began to change, and I began to get incrementally a tiny bit better. At first, it's just, okay, I feel a little bit calmer. I feel it's not quite as intense at night. I'm still itching. I'm still scratching. I'm still not sleeping, but it's not quite the hell that it was. It's just bit by bit by bit by bit. And then it took nearly 3 years from that point. And I kept on with super strict nutrition. I changed what I ate. I got rid of all medication. So from being a walking pharmacy cabinet for God knows how many years, I just stopped. I remember getting a big bag and throwing it in the bin, and that was such an amazing feeling to do that. And I found natural creams that you can put on the body instead of the steroidal creams. I didn't understand at the time that when you put things on your body, they go into your bloodstream, which is how some cyclists and other athletes cheat. They put something on their skin and it seeps into the bloodstream. And And I didn't realize that's what I was doing with the steroids every night. And how I felt began to change. Even my personality began to change because...
If I could just stop you there, Alan, and just back you up a little bit.
Yeah,
and
no problem.
Let's come back to this point. When was it that you realized that you started to have like a chronic problem? You mentioned that you were about 21 years old. So you're a really young man getting going with his life and career and business, and you love life and hanging out with your mates and partying. I mean, I'm certain that it's no different where you live to where I live for a 21-year-old bloke. And all of a sudden you find yourself not doing so well and your health is kind of on a bit of a downward slope. How did you realize it wasn't just something like you were coming down with something, but it was actually chronic?
I think chronic, you only recognize when it doesn't go away. But I could recognize the changes. Yeah, occasionally everyone has the little bit of an itch here and there, and occasionally I would. Maybe I'd had a little bit of childhood eczema. But what happened at that age was I'd been super fit. Show me a picture of my 21st birthday and show me a picture of me a year later. It's like two different people. So I was super fit. At that age, I would, until the age of 21, I used to go to the gym at least 3 or 4 times a week. I absolutely loved it. I was really into it. So really strong, really fit, full head of hair, perfect skin, always. That was me on the outside, and I felt great, super fit, very strong for my weight. I'm a very light person, but I had a really good strength to weight ratio. And then, the insomnia started to kick in, the itching started to kick in, and it just became really difficult to sleep, really difficult to get up in the morning, almost impossible to hold down a job. I'd be constantly late and letting people down. And then, it just started to get worse and worse, and I just could never relax. And you could see it in my face. I'd become thinner and thinner, and just look, my eyes, when you're not sleeping, you can see it in your eyes, and they'd look wrong. And then after about maybe 6 months of this, I went to a party one night. I slept on a sofa, woke up the next morning, and there was a bald patch on my head. And I thought someone had used Imac, the hair removal cream, and done that as a little bit of a joke. And then it just started to go in other patches, and then eventually all over. My eyebrows went, the eyelashes went, the beard hair went, the whole thing went. And by this time, it had been 6 months of the itching, scratching, insomnia. The hair had all fallen out. I was unrecognizable. Obviously, that affects my personality because the stress of not being able to hold down a job, the stress of not being able to pay bills, the stress of, you're talking about meeting girls and things like that. You can't really, when your skin's in that state, you can't really get close to people in that way. It was just, all these stresses were caving in on me, and I didn't know what to do and couldn't find a way out. So I'd see the doctors and they'd give me more medication. And
did they label it for you? Did they say that you're diagnosed with X, or did they say, well, we're not really sure what's wrong with you, we'll just treat your symptoms, here's something to make you feel better and give you some relief?
I don't think they actually labeled it. I mean, you could label it eczema, an extreme form of eczema. You could label it an extreme form of dermatitis, and maybe they did. I can't quite remember. They'd also say insomnia. They'd also say anxiety. They'd also say alopecia areata. So these are all labels for the different elements of the condition. But I also noticed that around this time, I started to come down with every cold and flu going as well. So that was another sign. I'd always been in really good health. Like I say, I was fit and active, and that disappeared as well. So it was just the wheels came off the bus, and the only way you know it's chronic is when it's gone on for so long and it's only getting worse. It's not getting better.
When I read your story before we did this interview, I have to say that I was pretty alarmed, really, especially when you were talking about not being able to sleep. And I know a little bit about that being in the military, and I know how hard that is. And I can remember, and it's absolutely no comparison whatsoever, but I do know that when you're out on operations, more so when I was in the Navy than when I was in the Army, you'd work like 12 hours on, 12 hours off in defense watches on a ship at sea. But in the 12 hours that you were off, you weren't sleeping for 12 hours. You were working for probably 6 of those hours. 12 hours on means you're actually doing your job. And I'd be sitting in front of a radar set and doing what I was doing in the Navy. But in the time that you had off, you'd work for 5 or 6 hours. So you're only really sleeping for 4 or 5 hours at a time. And every now and then you get a bit of a longer one, like 7 hours. But I can remember constantly feeling tired. And I was a young man. I was in my early 20s as well. And I just remember constantly feeling tired. And as I've gotten older and, I transferred from the Navy to the Army, I learned more about interrogation techniques and capture when you catch a bad guy. And one of the most effective things you can do is just not let these people go to sleep. You don't have to touch them. You don't have to talk to them. And people will do anything if they can just put their head on the pillow and go to sleep and get a good night's sleep. Even if that's just a nap for 45 minutes, a couple of sleep cycles, that's enough for them to actually say anything that you want them to say. In some ways, it's almost enhanced interrogation techniques. It's torture. You're torturing somebody. And when I read your story about not being able to sleep like that, especially as a young bloke, and especially early on in your 20s there, when you're just getting going, you're finding your feet, you've become a man and you're moving forward, and then all of a sudden that's taken away from you. One of the questions that I had as I was preparing for this interview was, how did you function as a normal person? And I think you've answered that already by saying, well, you couldn't hold down a job, you couldn't hold down a girlfriend. Very, very stressful, right?
Yeah, I tried to function as a normal person, but what you're saying about the torture, interrogation, that's really funny, because I read a book in the early days of this. I remember reading a book about sleep, and that's something it said in the book, how it was a really effective form of torture and interrogation. And you do start to lose your mind. You start to lose your marbles a little bit. I tried to function when I could. So when I was well enough, I would try to hold down a job. So I would get a job. There'd always be low-level jobs because I was never able to climb up anywhere. So bar work or whatever, or shop work. And then very quickly I'd start losing that job. I'd be losing my mind. I'd be unable to get there on time. I'd let everybody down, and then I'd lose a job. And the same cycle would keep on repeating. And that was very, very difficult. When I started as a singer, that was 2004. So we're 8 years into this. And how I was able to function as a singer, first of all, I was only going out 2 or 3 times a week. And it was at night. So I was always awake at night anyway. So that was fine. I was always wired at night. So that was okay. To get me well enough to begin my singing career, I went to the dermatology unit of a hospital in Salford, Manchester, and they would inject me. I'd bend over and they'd give me a big injection of steroids, a whole load of steroid pills as well that were supposed to only have so many for such a short amount of time. And they said, no, just take as many as you need for as long as you want or as long as you need. Same with the creams. The creams were the most potent creams that you could get. The GP couldn't prescribe them. Only the hospital could prescribe. And they said on these creams, maximum so many days, never use on broken skin, never use on areas of thin skin. But of course, the only way I could function was they said, look, use as much as you want, as often as you need, for as long as you need. So it would all be on broken skin. It would be on those thin areas of skin that you're not supposed to put it. It would be for far more time and far more often and in far greater amounts than you're ever supposed to use. So that's what I had to do in order to function, to begin as a singer. And when I began as a singer, it was the only way I could see of possibly digging myself out of this hole. It was the only way I could see of earning any money when I'm not well enough. So that's what got me started. Ill health did affect my singing career in more ways than one. Very occasionally, I wasn't able to fulfill my obligations as a singer. And also, I fell out with my first agent. I mean, partly they were a little bit dodgy, and not everything they did was above board. And I spoke my mind, but I had no control over how I spoke my mind. I had no control of myself. It was like with the itching, you'd turn a tap on and you couldn't turn it off. And when I got stressed or angry or upset, you could turn it on, but I could not turn it off. So
did you ever find yourself in those places, like checking yourself? I know that for me, sometimes life can get a little bit frustrating and you either lash out yourself, like at yourself or at somebody else around you. And then you're like, instantly, dude, don't say that, man. That's not you. And then you start to feel a little bit of remorse about your behavior because that's just not who you are, and you know that. But your situation's compounded by your circumstance and what's wrong with you. Is that something that happened to you often?
Yeah, I think so. There's quite a lot that, I'm not proud of, but I understand how and why I did it, and I've learned from it, and I'm infinitely calmer now, partly because of when there's no itching, you're calmer. When you're sleeping, you're calmer. When you don't have all this medication, this cocktail of pharmaceuticals in your system, you're calmer. And the other thing I think is nutrition helps as well. I actually think it doesn't just influence the body, it influences the mind immensely. There is a friend of mine who has a strong interest in anxiety. He's a psychologist, he's got a psychological degree. He's led a lot of support groups down the years, so he knows a lot of people with anxiety issues. And he says of all the people that he knows, he's only seen two make one other and me, makes such a dramatic turnaround. So the levels of anxiety were through the roof, but through everything that I've done to overcome the health issue, it's just, I'm just completely normal now. So I'm far more in control of what I do. I can check myself, like you say. I'm not saying that I don't say things out of turn sometimes, and I don't do things I regret. But
of course, yeah.
The level of awareness, the level of control, and the level of calm is infinitely greater than it ever was back in those days. So,
well, that's really, really, really great to hear that you got on the other side of it. You were, before I interrupted you there and took you right back to the start of it, you were talking about how you were using diet to incrementally see improvements there. And I'm curious, what was it that you were eating that was making a difference? Like you mentioned a vegetable juice, for heaven's sake. I'm sure that normal people, well, me, I don't want to drink vegetable juice, man. What was it that made a difference? You'd have something and you'd notice it. What was it?
Well, things like vegetable juice, I know now, I didn't know then, it's full of highly anti-inflammatory properties and some of the things I wouldn't do now. So I was making sure I got loads of oils, for example. So I was using something called Udo's Choice oil. I now wouldn't do that. I'd get my oils directly from the whole food because I believe that the evidence is overwhelming that it's much healthier if you can get the oil within the matrix of the plant. So that's the nut, the seed, the avocado, whatever it is. It's healthier in the way that sugar is healthier from fruit than if you're having fructose in an isolated form. But at the beginning, I was using a lot of Udo's oil, moisturizing from the inside. I was having a lot of seeds, moisturizing from the inside. I was trying to eat loads of vegetables, again, because it's anti-inflammatory. Any foods that I could find that were known to be anti-inflammatory, I was trying to have them. So I was also having low GI, so that's glycemic index. So rather than getting sugar rushes, you're on a more stable level. And again, that really, really calmed me down. So just trying to calm my system down on every possible level. And then just simple things like herbal teas as well. So I don't really see why there's a distinction between herbs and nutrition in the way that there is, because to me it's all natural stuff that you're putting in your body. And exactly. So I was using lots of different things. Back then I wasn't vegan. I mean, these days I would call it whole food plant-based, which is vegan, but vegan doesn't have to be whole food plant-based. You can be a junk food vegan.
So you don't have beef or chicken in your diet or fish or anything like that?
No, but I did at the beginning of this journey. I was having, for example, a lot of fish. I was trying to get those oils into my body. And you do get oils in your body. So I was getting the oil in my body from the oil. I was getting it from the fish. I was getting it from seeds. I was trying to get, like I say, I don't know if it really works this way, but my thinking at the time was moisturize from the inside, get those oils in the body. And for example, what I use these days that I think I would recommend, if I know anyone with a skin issue, the first thing I'd say to them is use flaxseed or linseed, depending on what it's called where you live. And if you can have a couple of tablespoons of milled flaxseed or linseed every day, preferably not cooked, because that way the oil is intact, it's not been damaged by the heat, and the inflammation and the itching and maybe the redness and the soreness and even the dryness will improve dramatically very, very quickly. So I use loads of linseed, for example, linseed, flaxseed, hemp seed, chia seed, these kind of things, because they've got the right ratio of omega-3 to omega-6, which is something I've learned about. Omega-6 is really inflammatory. Omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. So you need that correct balance in your body, and then everything starts to function.
Where are you getting your information from? Is it Dr. Google or is it trial and error or both?
Originally, it was multiple, very often contradictory sources.
Yeah.
And it was an absolute minefield. As you'll know, you'll see the headlines.
That's the problem, man. Is like you hear some information about something and then you read it, you go, oh man, that's the best thing in the world. I'm going to try that. And then you just scroll a little bit more, click something else, and somebody nearly died because they did that. It's ridiculous. How did you navigate that?
Initially, it was so difficult and it was so confusing and it was so frustrating and it was a complete minefield. In the last 2 or 3 years, it's become really easy because it's actually done deliberately. The whole tactic of misinformation and confusing people is done on purpose by the food industries and the pharmaceutical industries because they want you to just keep buying the same old crap that you've been buying for you. They don't want you to change your habits. So they think if we confuse them enough, they'll say, what the hell? I don't know what's right. I'll just keep on doing what I enjoy and what I've always done. So that's why it's done. It's the same tactics used by the cigarette industry in the early days of the information coming out about cigarettes. They'd use all sorts of confusion tactics. And people would say, well, I don't know what to believe, so I enjoy my cigarettes, so I'm going to carry on smoking. The same tactics are used. And I know that because I listened to Dr. Michael Greger, who has been on London Real. Now, I found his site a couple of years ago, so I started hearing people talking about the benefits of whole foods and how oil is actually not that good for you and how certain things aren't that good for you and certain things are. But I didn't have any science to back it up. I'm like, well, it's just some bloke saying so. An Australian bloke, for example, called Durian Rider, he was making all sorts of claims. I'm thinking, well, where's the evidence? I'm not seeing the evidence. And then eventually I came across nutritionfacts.org and some other doctors like Dr. Greger who back everything they say up with the peer-reviewed science. And that gave me well, first of all, my own learning, trial and error of my own journey. So by this time, I'd been at it for 6-7 years of doing this, that, and the other. And even what a lot of nutritionalists told me, I believe now to be wrong. I believe that a lot of what is taught in various nutritional schools is wrong. And you've got in nutrition, it's diversity. You mentioned it in your introduction with the introductory questions. You've got paleo, you've got whole food plant-based, and they're almost complete opposites.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're both claiming to be right. But what I've come to learn because of the internet, and thank God for the internet, because I would not be well. I would not be in this state of health without the internet. In the olden days, pre-internet, I'd still be the mess that I was. Because with the internet, eventually, I managed to find the sites that provide the peer-reviewed evidence, plus my own experience as well just showed me that overwhelming body of evidence is over here, which is, to my mind, it's whole food plant-based. That's where the evidence is leading. So that's what I go with these days, and it seems to work absolutely brilliantly. So
when you started to get better and you recognize that some of these things were working for you, that must have been incremental. Obviously, when you're unwell, particularly when you're sleep deprived, because that's the thing that I can relate to most in your condition now. I don't know about the itching or the anxiety that you suffered from. I can't relate to that at all. I've never suffered from those things. But as you started to get well, that's an incremental process. How did you focus your attention to keep moving forward on that thing and not try something else? Like, this is now working. If I keep doing this, I'm getting relief and it's incremental. How did you focus on that? I get distracted so easily. Distraction's a wicked thing. And even if something's working, I still get distracted by something else that I want to try.
Well, I get distracted very, very easily, particularly these days, because that internet, that's a wonderful thing, is also the ultimate distraction.
Yeah.
It's a very distracting world. But my door over there, I'm in my bedroom. My bedroom door is over there. I had a calendar on the back of the bedroom door, and I would write down every night how I got on. And I remember one night when I slept from 3 a.m. till 9 a.m. And I just remember the next day how overjoyed I was at having just slept a solid 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I would write that down. And then I'd have some bad nights and some worse nights. And then eventually I'd have another half decent night. And again, I'd mark it down. And then I'd actually have a night when there was no itching and no scratching. And I would have got through a night without scratching. I might have slept, I might not, but I'd get through without scratching. Then it'd be a night where I slept and I didn't scratch. And I'd mark it down. And then I'd count them. And I remember I did 4 in a row. So I had this extreme focus. And it was an absolutely extreme focus, because when you are suffering enough, you naturally have that focus if you want to get well, if you want to beat it. And sometimes people have said to me they wouldn't have, well, not sometimes, all the time people say, how did you have the discipline to do what you did? I couldn't possibly do it. And I just think, well, you're not suffering enough. If you're suffering enough, you will find the discipline. And in fact, it can almost become a problem because once you're on the other side of it, you might be too disciplined in the same way that I haven't read his book, but I read a little bit of his book, Johnny Wilkinson, the rugby player.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And his extreme discipline that made him such a good player also became a problem, and it almost made him mentally ill because he's practicing so hard and he's living so disciplined and he's so focused that it's almost a disorder. And particularly once he's stopped playing rugby or if he's injured, then it is a disorder. So I would have this extreme focus. I'd have the calendar on my wall. I remember I did 4 nights in a row, and then I'd have a couple of nights which weren't so good. And then I made 5 nights in a row and 6 nights in a row and then 8 nights in a row. And I just remember it, and I'd always have a target. Like when I used to go to the gym, I'd always, when I went to gym, I had to do more than the time before, whether it's one more rep or a bit more weight or one more set, whatever it was, I had to do more than the time before. And I write it down, going to do more next time. And I had to get more days. And I remember getting to 50 days and but the sheer joy and the sheer relief and the joy of just being able to get up every day. And I still don't take it for granted, but I probably almost do. I almost do now. And that was 2010 when that began to happen. It was this time of year, 2010, that I started to string it together. I remember it must have been about this time when I was stringing my 20, 30 nights together.
And that was the other thing that really struck me was when you come out on the other side of it, and it's a really empowering story and fabulous lessons of focus and discipline in there. You know, that applies to everything in your life, not just trying to get well in health. That, you know, if you incrementally get better at something, then you're going to get better at it in the longer term. When did it feel like it became the norm? Or was it the norm now that you're well, or are you acutely aware and remember how bad that was and you're just never going to go back there, right?
It's the norm that I'm well, but I think there perhaps are more layers. For the very first time in my life, I did a water-only fast in October and one again, I think it was February, March time this year.
How long did that go for?
7 days and 10 days.
Wow, long time. Really long time. Gosh.
Yeah. And I felt a big difference since then. That actually, I thought I was well, but actually I'm beginning to recognize myself in mentally, emotionally, physically. Even when I look in the mirror, I'm beginning to see something I've not seen since I was that 21-year-old guy.
Wow.
And the fasting seems to have reset everything. So I think that all those steroids and all that medication for all those years affected the balance of chemicals in my body on some level. And even when I got what I called well, in other words, I'm sleeping at night, I'm not itching, I wasn't actually fully myself. And I've got to say, it's only in the last few months that I'm beginning to think, no, this is it. I'm back now. And that's 22 years after the problem began. But I do feel like, no, I really am back now.
That's a quarter of your life. If we live to be 80, 90 years old, a quarter of your life is gone and you were unwell. So congratulations, mate, on coming out on the other side. And thank you so much for sharing your story, mate. That's so many important lessons there. If someone's facing health challenges like you were facing, what would you say the top 3 things are to go all in and concentrate and to muster that discipline? It must be people are in varying different stages of being unwell. And if you're on the very beginning of those stages, that's where it must be the hardest, right? What would you say the top 3 things are that they could focus on to help them get on the other side and find that salvation you have?
I think number 1 is realize that in the internet age, you can almost always find a solution. Money might be a barrier to some, but with nutrition, particularly whole food, plant-based nutrition, actually you can save money eating that way.
It's pretty simple, right?
Yeah. And if you have money, you can usually find someone to help. So when I started this process, I was in debt. So I actually thought, well, if I pay the money, and if I get well, I will have my earnings potential. So I think the fact we're in the internet age, that's the number 1 thing, because you can find someone who can help you. 10, 20 years ago, you couldn't, because you only had the conventional medicine. So if you had a problem that conventional medicine had either caused or could not help, that was your only port of call. These days, you can find all the information. So that's number one, that you have access like never before in history to all this information. So you can find it and you can pursue it and you can get well. So that's number one. Don't know about 2 and 3.
Well, I think those things all go hand in hand, don't they? You know, you've got all the information in the world. You've got to learn to distill that information and take what sort of is meaningful to you and flush the rest of it. And then it seems a bit of a common theme, that plant-based nutrition. Have you been learning much about gut health? I'm not sure about where you're from in the UK, but that's a hot topic in the sport and fitness arena here in Australia. And there's a lot of new science in and around gut health. Is that something you've spent a bit of time researching and learning about?
Yeah, I have. So I think most of my problems would probably have begun in the gut. I'm quite confident that I can say that. There's that leaky gut syndrome, because you've only got one cell layer within the gut. And once that's damaged, then that's when things that shouldn't get into the bloodstream are leaking into the bloodstream through the gaps in the walls there. And it's those that cause the autoimmune conditions. So the autoimmune condition can be the skin, the alopecia, those kind of things. And that's because the body is attacking what shouldn't be there. And these things, these molecules are very often similar to our own tissue. So we create antibodies to these molecules that shouldn't have got into our body. They're very similar to the molecules that constitute our own tissue. So then we're attacking our own tissue. So there's that aspect of the gut, and certain foods and certain medications are likely to damage that, and certain foods and certain supplements can heal that. And then there's the microbiome. So the microbiome is a massive issue. And I remember the first time I heard years ago that the microbiome can, if you take probiotics, which are supposed to help the microbiome, that can help the hair. So I don't use probiotics. What I use is the prebiotics. So when you're having a whole food plant-based diet, when you put the fiber in there, the fiber is the food that allows the right microbes to proliferate, and the wrong foods will allow the wrong microbes to proliferate. So you are not just Robert Brus, the individual, you are Robert Brus, the ecosystem. So 90% of the organic matter in you is not you. It's the microbiome. Only 10% is you.
I only learned that recently, is that you feed that microbiome and that's what helps you maintain that balance in your body. So whatever I'm eating is feeding the things that are in my gut, which is controlling what's happening in my brain, which is controlling how I behave and what I do. So all directly related to those sorts of things. There's been a lot of documentaries and Aussie-based stuff that's come out here in Australia recently about all the studies that scientists are doing, because we haven't had the computer technology to be able to recognize that microbiome in your gut. But now they can register all those things and they can see what's there. And when they know what's there, they can work out what the imbalance is and get you to eat something to balance that up to make you feel better.
Yeah.
Seems like a logical solution, but now there's some science around it. And it's a really, really amazing topic, and it's well worth learning about, particularly if you're not well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, they can take it to extremes. I've heard people have implants. So they've actually taken feces from people in rural Africa where they've got a really healthy microbiome, and they'll take an extract from that and they'll shove it up the backside of someone who's got a health problem, and it'll sort them out, this implant. But if you feed it, if you put the microbes in there and don't feed them, they're just going to die off and go out your system. And another way to reset it is the fasting. So again, that's another reason why I'm feeling much better now. The fasting is kind of a reset for the microbiome. It empties out and then you refill it. But when you refill it, you only fill it with the good stuff.
One of the things that I've learned about myself and biohacking my body, I guess it's nothing to compare with what you're experiencing and really what we're talking about here. But I know if I drink too much booze, and I had a bit of a bad relationship with booze over the years, just drinking too much, not drinking like an alcoholic, but just binge drinking with my mates on the weekend and carrying on like I shouldn't be. But everybody does that. But as I got a little bit older and learnt more about that sort of stuff and started to care more about my health and less about partying, I discovered that alcohol is like poison, right? And I never someone said that to me once, I can't remember who it was, but I would drink booze and I'd have a great time, and the next day I'd feel like hell with a hangover, and it's like you're poisoning yourself. And as I get older and I'm more educated about those things, I recognize that when I eat really good food and I've got a really good diet and I exercise and I concentrate and look after my health, I feel amazing. But as soon as I go and drink one bottle of beer, one glass of beer, or some bourbon or something like that, I can immediately feel that that is not good for you, that you are literally poisoning yourself. It's like kind of putting diesel in the unleaded car. It's all right if you put it in there, but as soon as you turn the key, it pumps it through the system. That's a real problem, and it's going to cost you some money to get that fixed. And, costing you some money to get your body fixed is, either throwing it all up or being really unwell the next day. So I've learned to lay off the booze. Nothing wrong with having a drink here and there for sure, but I think maybe I'm more mentally aware of what's actually going on and not poisoning myself as much, and being able to control my health with my diet in so many other aspects. It's a really great thing.
I think it's a good sign that you're in good health, because I think the better health you're in, the more sensitive you are to anything that's not good for you.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm trying to go with that point is I'm hypersensitive to that. If I just drink one beer, I can really feel that poisoning me. And I think that's in my head a little bit as well. I'm not poisoning myself with one beer. It's not the end of the world. But I do know that when I drink that, I immediately feel different. And the alcohol in that, it doesn't take very much for that to actually react with me, because my diet and my exercise is really good. And I really don't drink very often, once a month, every couple of months, I have a drink here and there. It's really sort of rare. So when I do that, I recognize straight away. And alcohol for me is a real downer. I have 2 or 3 beers with my mates and I'm sort of falling asleep at the table at the pub, kind of like, man, that's not good for you.
No, especially when you get up at 4:30 most mornings, you need your energy.
Exactly. I just want to shift gears here a little bit, Alan. One of the things that I've encountered in my life, I work with a fella in my business. He's an exercise physiologist, but he was really, really unwell also. He suffered from chronic fatigue. He had cancer, but he got on the other side of that and got himself healthy in that. And one of the most empowering things that I've seen him do on his journey is he created a foundation and a charity, and he really connected with other people that face the same health challenges. In his exercise physiology business, he helps a lot of people with chronic fatigue, because he suffered from that himself, and he understands how to treat that and help people with that. Have you, in your journey, been able to help and connect with other people and help them along the way as well?
I'm frustrated on this score, because I did actually start a course at a college. I wanted to study nutrition. As I progressed through the course, I was learning. This was when I was starting to really encounter the work of Dr. Greger on nutritionfacts.org and all these other people. And I was realizing that I believe the truth is over here. And what I realized the more I got into my college course was that they were teaching something that's over here. And it's methodologies I didn't believe in.
Quite different.
I actually got stuck. And one reason I'm doing what I'm doing now, this podcasting, is because I'm lost in life, because I don't know where I'm going, because there's no clear path for me to become a nutritionalist of the kind that I believe in. It would mean sort of bucking the system a little bit and branching out on a limb. And so I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. In fact, one reason I did this podcasting was because I thought, well, I can actually make more of a difference doing this than following that conventional path and being forced to conform to things that I don't believe are the truth. So, and I'm deferred at the moment from that course. I have to make a decision come September whether I go back or not. So in this period of deferral, I thought I can do this. I set up a group called Whole Food Plant-Based Manchester to try and connect people in the local area. But I haven't done like your friend. What he's doing is amazing, and I've got so much admiration for someone doing that. I would like to help people. I feel my future is in helping people with their health. It's in health and well-being. I just don't know exactly where and how, and I don't know how I'm going to take my knowledge and experience and translate that into something that's going to help as many people as possible. So that's been an enormous source of frustration for me, because I feel I have an immense wealth of experience and knowledge now. How I progress from here,
maybe I could share with you some of the things there to kind of stimulate your idea and your thought process. I think you're really on the right track there with that podcast, and kudos to you, mate, for doing that and putting that out there. There's another lady that I know, her name's Hannah. I'm actually going to have her on this podcast as well. She suffered from Lyme's disease, and I don't know much about that, but that's another chronic autoimmune disease, and it's pretty common. And she came out on the other side of it with plant-based diet and health, and very, very similar story to yours. And she now works with people in like a coaching program and helps them in a one-on-one scenario to get through the issues that they're suffering from. But I think that's slightly different to yours and slightly different to my other mate Brent as well, because they're able to label what's wrong with them. You know, they're labeled Lyme's disease. He was labeled with brain cancer, you know what I mean? And chronic fatigue syndrome. Yours is, you know, that the skin-based stuff, the dermatology and all of those types of things, that's labeled as well. But I think it's not as well known, or to bring that to life is going to be a bit of a harder task there for you. But I'm certain, mate, that you're not the only person there in the world that's suffered from that. And there's plenty of people that you can reach out to and help. Is that what you're all in on at the moment? That was my next question. What are you working on? What are you all in on? Is it the podcast? Is it reaching out and helping people? What are you working on?
Well, I am still all in on the nutrition. I'm trying to go as all in as I can on the podcast, definitely. I am always all in on helping people. So I've not managed to set things up in the way that your friends have set things up, but on an individual basis, I'm one of those who I'll bore people to tears talking about this, you know, in not talking about me, but in an effort to help, you know, because I believe this knowledge, everybody should know it. And then it's up to them what they do with it. In the same way that smoking, people know that smoking is not good for them. If they want to smoke, that's their choice, but they know it's not good for them. So my dream is a world where everybody knows this is good, this isn't so good, this does that. The knowledge is out there. It's there for free. It's just a case of getting it into the mainstream and disseminating it. And then it's up to people what they do with it. It's like you know, drinking doesn't make you feel good. So it's up to you if you have a drink or not. It's your choice. And if you want to enjoy a drink, great, but you know what the consequence is. And that's my dream, a world where everybody knows this. I think I've been really lucky in this lost period because I've had lots of different jobs. And in each different job, I will prepare my food differently. And I'll find ways to eat. Okay, I've got this job where I don't have time to eat. I've got this job where I actually can sit down and have a meal. I've got this job where I can't really. So how do I create my nutrition and my food and prepare it beforehand in such a way that whichever different kind of job I'm doing, different hours, different situations, I can still keep up this health. So I think that's maybe prepared me for being able to do coaching later. But the main thing is, I'd say 99% of illnesses that people have, and even premature deaths, the majority are avoidable in this day and age. The knowledge is out there, the information is out there, and it's out there for free. It's just getting it to people.
Excellent. Really, well, what do you do on a daily basis to make sure, I mean, you never want to go back to that. Do you have any daily routines or little morning routines or life hacks that you use on a daily basis to keep you sharp and focused and, hey, I'm never going back there, that type of thing? Give us some tips here, Al. Come on, mate. What have you got?
Okay. Well, the nutrition is one. Water as well. So you mentioned the microbiome. Alcohol in the water is not good for the microbiome. When you get the water out of the tap, faucet as Americans call it, that municipal water supply is full of chlorine and all sorts of other things. You don't want that going in your body. That chlorine, which is there for sanitation to kill the microbes, you're putting that in your body. It kills the microbes. So water, make sure it's filtered or spring water. Even what you're using in the shower. If you've had a skin condition, you need to have a shower filter as well, because that chlorine, we have a microbiome on our skin. If you want healthy skin, you need a microbiome on the skin. So I'll have a shower. I won't have it hot. I'll have it cool or cold, because cool or cold is not going to kill those microbes. It's not going to destroy the oil of the skin. It's also going to keep you feeling really alive and awake and alert. In terms of sleep, if I've been out late at night singing, bright lights in my eyes, you're driving home, you've got the bright lights in your eyes, it's late at night. So I found a way to fall asleep quickly, which is using blue blockers. So they're sunglasses that only block the blue light. The blue light from electric lights suppresses the melatonin from the pineal gland. So we're not producing that melatonin, which is a hormone that we need in order to sleep. So it's also one of the most powerful anti-carcinogens that we know of. So if you're not getting that, you're more likely to get cancer, which is why night workers get cancer. So if you have trouble sleeping, or if you're working late at night, put the blue blockers on. If you're working late at night on your screen, you can get a program called f.lux. That's Foxtrot LUX, ffoxtrot.lux. That filters out the blue light on your screen. So again, you can do those things. You can work late at night. You can be up late at night. But because you put those blue blockers on an hour before bed, You're going to sleep like a baby. And then in the daytime, get as much daylight as you can. Because again, if you get an hour's daylight, you're going to boost your nighttime melatonin by maybe 25%, something like that. I do earthing. I try and make sure I ground myself every day at some point. And yeah, there's just probably countless things I do that I can't even think of now.
There's some value bombs right in there, mate. There's some stuff that I don't do. I'd echo your words there about the blue lights from computer screens. One of our clients in my digital marketing business is an ophthalmologist, and he came into our office one time, and the first thing that he said to us was, "Is this all the gear you got, guys?" Because we just got computers in there because we're an IT business. And we're like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, I've got millions of dollars worth of equipment and looking in people's eyes all day, that sort of thing." And then he sort of came over to where I was sitting and he said, "Rob, mate, you've got to get rid of those screens." I'm like, "What are you talking about, man? How am I going to work if I don't have screens?" And he said, "No, you need to get these monitors." And he put us onto to a brand called BenQ. And BenQ monitors don't have any blue light in them. And he explained all the same things that you did, just in a bit more of a technical way because he was a doctor. But it's easier for me to understand when you explain it. Just don't look at blue light before you go to sleep is pretty much what he was saying. And if you're looking at a computer screen all day, get a monitor that doesn't have that. And as soon as we ditched our old ones, which were burning our brains in our brain box because of the blue light, and put these ones with no blue light in the BenQ monitors, I really, really did notice a difference, especially when I'm sitting at a desk all day doing what I'm doing in my day job. It absolutely makes a huge difference. I'll echo it. There's only one thing I don't like about that whole concept, and it's like, you're telling me what I can't do is look at my Facebook before I go to bed, man. I think I might die in the process if I can't do that.
Well, you can, but with your blue blockers on. Just
not on my fancy Samsung phone that like burns my retina out as I'm looking at it in the dark with nothing else around.
Get your blue blockers on. I don't know.
I think there's actually a setting on most smartphones actually where you can turn the blue light down on there, so that's really good.
Yeah,
but thank you for sharing those tips.
You can usually order. You can usually download f.looks on most devices. So.
That'll solve it. Well, thank you for sharing that, mate, and thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. That was really, really empowering, mate. Where can people find out more about you and your business if they want to connect with you and talk about those health issues or book you as a singer?
Okay, to book me as a singer, you'll find me at facebook.com/Alan, I can't even say it, Alan Burton Singer, all one word. Mm-hmm. My podcast is the Truth, Health, Freedom podcast, which is on Shout Engine and iTunes. You can listen or download for free. You can contact with me on Facebook, Alan Burton. So loads of places you can find me. I will eventually have a website for the singing. I'll eventually, after 14 years, I've still got no website. I'll eventually have a website, no doubt, for the podcast, and it's going to be on YouTube as well. But it's the Truth, Health, Freedom podcast. Find me on Facebook if you want to get in touch.
Well, if you want to connect with Alan, I'll make sure all of that information and those links and URLs are in the show notes. So please pop on over to the goallin.com.au website. Make sure you connect with Alan, and don't forget to subscribe to the Go All In podcast as well while you're there. So thanks again, Alan, for coming on the show. We really appreciate you sharing your story, and we look forward to catching up with you again soon. Bye for now, mate.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.